This is south of the city, looking up from the Kedron Valley. There you see the southern wall, which is the southern wall of Herod. Of course, the southern wall of the Hasmoneans or Maccabees would have been further north, and the southern wall of Solomon's temple further north than that. So the temple complex kept creeping south. But this is Old Testament Jerusalem, right? Or at least Old Testament Jerusalem is in there in the debris. Looking from the Mount of Olives over at this little falafel and soda stand, get some picture of the Old Testament city. You see how high it is? And when you start up down here, people are always going up and down in Jerusalem because, of course, it's on the side of a hill. As you go up, you see the debris that Kathleen Kenyon excavated. Here's the old Jebusite wall from the 18th century BC. There's the old wall with the wall from the time of David and the Judean kings on top of it. This is the very ancient wall with the Hebrew kings on top of that. So this area in here, above here, was the part that was inside the city wall. This terracing is much later and has nothing to do with this story. Now, of course there were houses here outside the city wall, but when trouble came, as it frequently did, you'd want to be from here up, inside, right? Now the problem is that the spring is down here, right down here. It's outside the city wall. So of course they covered it over, built it over and so forth, so that folks wouldn't know where it was. Folks like the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Syrians, whoever happened to be invading at the moment. If the water's out here, way down at the bottom, which is indefensible, you understand you can't defend an area down here, then what did they do about getting water inside the city? Well, yeah, the spring is here, so they tunneled back into the hill, and then they had up. How did David take the Jebusite city in the first place? It was Joab. Whoever gets up the shaft first will be the commander of the army. Now, Joab was already the commander of the army, and David was obviously trying to get rid of him. I don't know who got up first, but I know who Joab said got up first, and who was that? Okay. There's the ancient city wall of the time of the Jebusites, the oldest thing standing out in the open in Jerusalem. Now the masses of the tourists went to see the cenotaphs of David and Solomon, which are in the wrong place. And they went to see the Garden Tomb, which isn't really the Garden Tomb, and Golgotha, which isn't really Golgotha. But they went to see the tourist stuff. Okay? But this, which is the real stuff, was in weeds. I thought that was great. Judean outer wall of the city right there, with houses clinging right to it. Again, looking back from the other side to refresh your memory, these successive walls are up here, and the spring is down here. Now, of course, the spring, as you know, Hezekiah's city had moved across the valley and up the western hill. So Hezekiah had a much bigger city to defend, and he had to get the water somewhere central. Having it over here on Zion didn't really help, because he had not only this hill to worry about, he had that valley over there. You see, this is the top of the hill right here. This is the top of the hill. Then there's the Tyropian Valley on the other side, and the higher western hill over there. Do you get it? You understand that a lens flattens these distances out? There are two hills there, one higher than the other with a big valley in between. Hezekiah had a problem. He had people living over there and over here, and here was the water. So what did he do? Yeah, he moved the water through underneath Old Testament Zion to the far side, to a more central location. And how did he do that? Well, he set people to work from one side and from the other, not close together. They made an S curve We do not know how they did it. We only know that they came together, and each one had to curve, and they found each other nearly in the middle after more than a mile of digging. How exactly they did it is unclear. They left a notation behind, stating what day and saying how they had hurt each other's pickaxes, and they were only 3 or 4 feet off. If they just gone straight ahead, they would have hit anyway. There's the Maccabean wall. It was built higher up, built on the older wall. And here are all that debris of those houses that were destroyed in Jeremiah's time. Some of this is fairly clear as you look down in there. It might seem to you that that looks like it's just a pile of rubble, but if you actually look, you can see clearly defined walls. There's a monolith laying over that held up one of the tops of the houses. You can see the walls running along. You can even see the stairs going to the roof of this house if you look at it carefully. It's when you get used to the 3-room pattern of a house in the Judean style, it looks just like a regular house. The stairs are fairly well defined going up to the roof. Square house with a flat roof, stuff that we're familiar with. Looking out to the south from the Old Testament Jerusalem, you've got the one valley off here, the other valley coming around here and going down. Where does that valley go? Eventually, it goes down south of Jericho to the Dead Sea. You see that the walls that Nehemiah was working on up here were the later walls, the inner walls of the actual citadel. The older walls that David had put around here, Nehemiah wasn't repairing. Obviously, he didn't have the manpower to defend all that had once been Jerusalem. So he was defending just the citadel, building it as rapidly as could, with working with one hand and a sword in the other, remember it says, because they knew they were about to be attacked. And this is where the shaft from the spring comes out. It's still there, and it's out, and it's in an Arab's backyard. And basically you have to know what you're looking for to find it. And this is a picture of the spring in the cave as you come down the stairs behind that concession stand, with this cold, cold, cold spring water at the beginning of the tunnel. As it moves along, you're headed off for a mile walk. You want to make sure that it's not in the spring or the fall where it reaches all the way to the ceiling, or you'd end up drowned in Hezekiah's tunnel. And my favorite insult occurred here. This is interior of the tunnel. Have I told you the story of my favorite insult? All right, I will.
No, you can tell it now. I took archaeology with you and I heard it.
We're dying to hear it.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Thank you. We were a group of Bible teachers. These other men were New Testament teachers, and so they didn't really have the really thrilling part of the Bible to deal with, so I was explaining it to them. In the cave, there's a bench there, and there was an Arab guide sitting there, and he was waiting to earn some money, and so along came this group of tourists, and he came up and he began to tell us the story. The story was somewhat garbled. He didn't have it correct anyway. Plus he was going to explain. And we kept putting him off, and he kept continuing to act as guide very strongly. But before we actually started down the tunnel, I finally said to him, "No, we're not going to hire you as a guide. You can follow us, but we won't give you any money. I'm going to be the guide for this group." And he was very offended at that. He went over and he sat back down, grumbling on the bench. And he pulled his robes around him, a huff, and said, "1,000 shits on you, sir." It was the most respectful insult that I've ever had. I've remembered it. I've remembered it in connection with Hezekiah's tunnel ever since. The water is actually flowing here. This is where you come out, the far end. I knew we were near the far end when I saw the floating banana peel. You begin to get desperate and think that you're never going to see the far end because it gets cold. The water is cold. But trash and then the sound of the kids. What happened here? Who knows this story? Jesus made the man go wash in the pool. Remember that? What? Yes. The Siloam pool. Yeah. Ah. As you walk up to this pool, on the side here is some rock cutaway, and this is very interesting. The pool had been brought down the east side before Solomon ever did this thing inside. The pool water had been brought down the east side of the Old Testament Zion by Solomon's men, who tunneled it down to the area south of Zion where he had his gardens. Do you remember the peacocks and the apes and ostriches and all that? Solomon's zoo and his gardens and his park. Remember that's mentioned in the Old Testament? That was in this area here, and what you're actually looking at is the water course that was once cut over. Straight down through there. This is actually an excavation of King Solomon. I was at the end of the film, but see the tunnel up at the top? There's still water trickling down in it, and it was watering this Arab's garden. I didn't stop to change film because I was getting pelted with stones. I made the best of it. This thing has a central thing, and then there's a number of things that come out off the side. For about half a mile there's this tunnel with the water system of Solomon still very, very clear and visible. It's been excavated and dated. This is the real thing. This one is plugged up and has a little garbage in it, as you can see. There's another one, slightly to the north. This is the main entrance into the tunnel that you would go in to service the tunnel to keep it clean and so forth. It's in an Arab's backyard. He uses the entrance to the tunnel to store his junk, sort of like you would in your garage. I paid him $6 to let me take a picture of this, and he said to me that every so often somebody comes around and wants to take a picture of it. What is it? I told him it was one of the main entrances to King Solomon's waterworks, and she thought I was joking. That it was another legend. No, it really is. There's the area down to the south. This is where Adonijah was crowned by the Enrogel spring. The water's still flowing. That's water there. It don't look like it. It's interesting that Solomon's waterworks still has water flowing through it, even though there's a lot of trash. When was that? 1000 BC? Well, after 30 centuries, things have a way of getting filled with trash. I don't think that they thought that 30 centuries later there'd still be water running through it. This is all that's left of the hewn bedrock stairs that went from the lower part of the Old Testament city of Jerusalem to the upper part. It's just a few little sections that you can see where the stairs were. This was the main staircase up. Okay. This is one of the largest cisterns in the Old Testament city of Jerusalem, also largely a dumping ground here. A great synagogue was built over this in New Testament times, the synagogue of the freedmen. Who should you connect that with? Non-ethnic Jews, converted Jews. Who was it who went and preached powerfully in the synagogue of the freedmen, began to make converts, and so brought himself into trouble with the authorities and was murdered as a result? Stephen. Yeah. There is the cistern. What does the size of this cistern suggest to you? Yes, so what would it be for? Yeah. Would you think this was somebody's private house, or do you think this was for? Yeah. This is just south of the area of the palaces of Judah, of the kings of Judah, and this may have been where the fortress, the great armory of the forest of the house of Lebanon that's mentioned in the Old Testament was.